this 40-gin beaver might actually be more valuable than the 3 caribou in front of us.
Yes! Come on!
Because a beaver carries up to 25% body fat and thick slabs of meat, which pretty much secures him an early spot in this season's top 3, putting him up there with Hunting King Lycan, Fishing King Burti as one of the most well-fed contenders heading into winter. The brand new 2026 season of Alone has officially begun, and I'll continue writing this long 10,000 character breakdown to walk you in detail through episode 4 of season 13.
Let's go, baby! Let's go!
As the contestant with the least screen time this season, Nilu only showed up on day 2 to bag a rabbit.
可以改成之后他的镜头仿佛停格在吃兔子的画面上，一晃到了第10天。
And Nilu is still sitting by the fire savoring rabbit meat. But that doesn't mean he's done nothing over these 10 days. On day 4, while exploring, Nilu noticed his waterproof boots split open, so he stitched them with needle and thread, a fix that called for precision. Later, while scouting around, Nilu gathered some discarded junk. Out here, finds like that always feel like treasure.
他布的套索和陷阱收获不小，除了常吃的兔子之外，
收获了一只小麝鼠。虽然前期吃的不少，
Nilu still hasn't begun a permanent shelter, choosing instead to focus on the higher value beaver. He set up snares and a trail camera along the routes where beavers pass. And if he can catch one and record the process, it will become a spectacular hunting sequence in this episode. But for Nilu, getting food right now is not the biggest challenge. In this kind of wet environment, the priority is preserving the meat. Nilu wants to build a smoking rack to make jerky and prepare for winter. If he manages to hunt a beaver later on, this smokehouse can immediately be used to process and preserve the beaver meat. While he's building the smokehouse, Nilu's mind is filled with scenes of hunting beaver. He had a hunch that this giant smokehouse was being built in advance specifically for a beaver. It was basically a tiny shelter. Once Nilu got the smokehouse frame up, he packed horsetail grass for insulation. Long, slender stalks are dense and good at retaining heat. It took Nilu a full day to build this smokehouse, with only the door left for tomorrow. At dawn the next day, Nilu continued working on the smokehouse, again building a frame from branches and then packing horsetail grass on the outside as infill. A grass smokehouse taller than a person was soon completed, and it looked very well sealed. But this type of smokehouse comes with a safety risk. After long or repeated smoking, the horsetail grass dries out and turns very flammable. Later, smoking sessions might easily see Nilu's smokehouse go up in flames, risking heavy losses. The intense labor of building the smokehouse, the waterproof boots he'd stitched up with a needle and thread, split open again. For Nilu, this was no small problem. In the Arctic, the ground is often wet tundra and melt zones. Once waterproof boots fail, cold, wet feet can lead to frostbite and impair mobility. With Arctic temperatures dropping daily, this pair of waterproof boots became critical. Nilu heated spruce branches to melt the resin and smeared it on the cracks in his boots. When the resin hardened, it formed a waterproof layer. In the short term, it could keep moisture out, but this repair method was ultimately only a stopgap. Resin is waterproof, but lacks the flexibility needed in a boot sole. With continuous walking and heavy labor, this natural glue was very likely to crack again. For Nilu, securing enough food mattered more than fully fixing his boots. Checking his snares and traps became part of his daily routine. For now, most of Nilu's food comes from his traps, and this living off nature is very unreliable. That's also why he's been reluctant to burn a huge amount of energy on building a permanent shelter. The good news is that Nilu spots beaver tracks around his traps. That night, after he'd reset every snare, the trail camera recorded a beaver coming by. As the beaver slipped into the snare and got caught, by the time dawn broke, Nilu went to check his snares and traps as usual, but heard an animal crying by the water. He trailed the cries to see what was happening, clueless at first, and only on reaching the riverbank did he realize it was a beaver.
That giant log I had across the line. He's snared up. He's not going anywhere.
Beavers are strong enough to drag logs that weigh 30 pounds more than they do. That explains the scene. The beaver hit the snare, sensed danger, bolted to the water, dragged the log, and ended in this position. Nilu approaches the beaver from behind, axe in hand, and its tension spikes to the limit. Sensing its fate, the beaver makes a desperate last stand. Right then, Nilu's survival plan finally pivoted. This 20-kilogram beaver. It's nowhere near a moose in size, but the fat packed into its body is what really matters for staying alive. Each pound of beaver meat packs around 900 calories, and this one could yield Nilu close to 27,000 calories overall. That's enough to sustain him for a good while once winter really kicks in. The smokehouse he built the day before yesterday can finally be put to use.
I can barely hold it up, it's so heavy. This gives me food security. Let's go, baby! Let's go!
Beaver 身上都值钱，皮毛可做保暖衣物和装备。
Its organs can replenish nutrients and restore strength, and its tail is packed with fat. This for Nilu. That's the real treasure here. With this beaver, Nilu finally has a steady fat supply. He skins the beaver, then removes its organs one by one. That beaver yields a hefty stash of meat, likely turning into Nilu's lifeline for the next few weeks. A flock of migratory birds passes overhead, and when Burti sees it, his heart tightens. The birds flying south mean winter is arriving, and he knows there's little time left to build a shelter. By the next morning, the distant peaks are dusted white. Winter is closing in faster than Nilu expected. Even with this beaver meat voucher in hand, how many days can Nilu really hang on? The snow piling up on the mountains seems to be urging all the contestants to hurry up and finish building their shelters. Otherwise, the only thing waiting for them will be
There
a
is
merciless
snow
tap
in the
out.
mountain. I need to finish the shelter. I have no more time.
Out on the bare Arctic flats, snow could hit any night, and with no permanent shelter yet, Andrew can feel the pressure closing in. So far, he's only taken 2 squirrels, and he's torn between the food shortage and how he can't rebuild his strength. And on the other, winter's near, and he still doesn't have shelter. If he keeps stalling, Andrew might actually become the one still stuck in a tent when the deep cold hits. He decides to start building a permanent shelter today. Between 2 large trees, Andrew begins constructing a sloped shelter. The space inside is probably only enough for a single bed. It's likely the tiniest long-term shelter I've seen. So cramped, there's no room for a fireplace to keep warm. Such a tiny shelter may not hold up when the Arctic's cold and winds arrive. Long-term hunger has left Andrew too weak to keep up shelter building, so he picks up his bow and arrows, pouring his remaining strength into hunting instead. Because in this challenge, food is the deciding factor. Around Andrew's camp is a stretch of shrubs, and pushing his way through this tangle is brutally hard, which is a big reason he's been so slow to take any game. Out hunting, he grabs every edible berry he spots. On days he came back empty-handed, Andrew was basically living off these berries. He forced his way through the brush into the meadow, hoping the open ground would offer a better shot at game. But the wet, muddy grassland drains his strength quickly, and from the thicket comes the sharp chatter of a squirrel. In the blink of an eye, one of Andrew's snare traps had caught a squirrel, which jolted him into realizing he should check his traps. This squirrel was like a sedative, but when he went on to check the second trap, that hollow, uneasy feeling surged back up again.
Nope, nothing. I hate snares. I really do.
He'd once been proudest of this trap, but it had never caught a thing. That made Andrew start to resent it. People are realistic after all. If a trap can't bring in food, no matter how perfectly it's built, no one's gonna like it. A big reason Andrew has done so poorly in hunting is that he's from the UK, where bow hunting is banned. So Andrew has almost no experience hunting with a bow, which explains why he's barely used it at all. Leaning on his traps for passive food has felt hopeless, but just as he's about to give up, he suddenly discovered one of his snares had finally snagged a rabbit. Right then, gripping it like a rare prize, he felt his destiny finally start to shift.
It would appear that my fortunes have changed.
Andrew's confidence returns. He feels this strategy can keep him out here far longer. So he sets up a large number of snares and traps, making it his daily routine to maintain and check them. The sheer number of traps greatly increased his chances of a successful hunt, and Andrew managed to catch a rabbit. Up to this point, Andrew has already managed to catch 2 rabbits, and for someone in the middle of building a permanent shelter like him, it's a clear safety net. With food put aside, Andrew feels far less pressure to rush his permanent shelter. When Andrew heads back to camp with his spoils, he spots fresh bear tracks in the grass.
Very fresh grizzly bear tracks.
Those tracks mean there's a bear somewhere nearby. Under local hunting regulations, participants are allowed to hunt black bears, but not grizzlies. Since processing rabbits could draw in a grizzly, Andrew plays it safe and throws up a temporary tent down by the shore. There on the shoreline, he cooks up a pot of rabbit, his first truly substantial protein-rich meal since arriving in the Arctic.
This is going to be so good. What a perfect day. I plan to put more snares down. This new area has a lot of potential. There's beaver, muskrats, rabbits. I just need to keep the pressure on now, catch more, and get myself back to taking in enough calories to be able to function. If I can keep myself in a good condition, I know I can sit it out for longer.
After eating his fill, Andrew returns to camp to keep working on the shelter. But the rabbit he left hanging on the tripod remains, and it lures in a black bear. The food stores Andrew worked hard to build are gone, taken with little effort, erasing in a moment the hours of hunting and trapping he'd poured his strength into. For Pedrosa, who has already finished his permanent shelter, securing food is now his survival task. He vents his frustration under the covers. He heads out, as usual, to check his snares, his primary food source besides hunting and fishing. But he's not the only one eyeing those snares. There may also be a crafty fox watching them, so checking them early in the morning is essential. Today, though, he lingered that extra second in the shelter and didn't head out until after 11, and his prize is one missing rabbit. Pedrosa resets and tidies the trap, and for now, he still has 2 rabbits in reserve. So losing this one doesn't affect him too badly. After circling outside, he finds only a few berries to keep himself going. On his way back to the shelter, a clear, sharp squirrel call reached his ears. Pedrosa instantly drew his bow and loosed an arrow.
Squirrel again.
Even at close range, he missed. Up to this point, Pedrosa was down to just 2 arrows. If he lost those last 2 as well, he'd be completely out of the running for any large game, which would also dim his hopes of winning the title. Fortunately, he did manage to recover the arrow. The temperature was only 5 degrees, and with the cold rain soaking everything, that damp chill was making his hands even stiffer. Once he found the arrow, he headed straight back toward camp, scanning the surroundings as he walked. A skilled hunter can pick out game in a cluttered landscape, and a grouse was ahead of him. Pedrosa successfully brought down the grouse. It wasn't a particularly big haul, but for Pedrosa right then, it arrived just when he needed it. After the cold and his earlier mistakes, he finally got confidence. Right now, Aaron is among the coziest contestants. The shelter he built early is keeping him well insulated in the cold.
Slept really good last night. Feeling pretty homey in here. Starting to get that cold fall feeling. Today's project is probably work on the fireplace.
But the Arctic hasn't fully slipped into winter yet, and if he wants to stay comfortable once the deep freeze hits, insulation by itself won't cut it. He's in this for the long haul. Not a brief spell of hunger and cold. Aaron decides to add a fireplace for warmth, so he can finally rest through those bitter winter nights. Once awake, Aaron spots a safety hazard. A tree near the shelter is leaning toward his dwelling. Once winter hits and the winds strengthen, that tree could come down and crush the shelter. Given that he still needs a lot of wood to improve the shelter, Aaron decides to cut the tree down. But before he starts, he has to think about which way it will fall. How can he make sure it drops exactly where he wants? A question like this wouldn't slow a carpenter down. After a short pause, Aaron picks which way to notch the tree, then saws a cut into one side of the trunk, drives a wooden wedge into the notch to pry it up, guiding the tree to fall the opposite way.
Holy, thank goodness.
In this way, he removes a safety hazard and also gets usable timber to improve his shelter. So far, Aaron has caught 4 fish, and for high-intensity work like today's tree felling, he burns about 695 calories per hour. The food reserves he has on hand give him the confidence to keep going. While refining his cabin, Aaron realizes that processing logs is very awkward. The trunks are naturally cylindrical and roll easily on the ground, so after every swing, he has to reposition the wood. This not only slows him down, but also drains more energy. Sharpening the axe doesn't delay chopping wood. To save strength when working with timber, Aaron decides to build a simple support frame so he can raise the logs off the ground and make subsequent cutting and shaping more stable. He modifies the original tree stump, cutting grooves into the flat top so that logs can sit securely on it. But when he starts chopping, he realizes the grooves still don't grip the wood well enough, so he keeps working the stump and adds a wooden brace.
This is your locking mechanism here. It locks it down. And this is your thing. So if you got a smaller piece, you just unlock it, twist it a bunch, push it down, and then put this on. Ting! Ain't going nowhere.
Once the support is done, Aaron no longer has to fight with rolling logs. With the wood fixed in the right position, both trimming and later processing become much more stable. It might seem like a simple helper, but it saves a lot of time otherwise wasted on constant readjustment and spares him a lot of needless effort. For Aaron, still deep in his shelter build, every bit of energy saved can be redirected into the construction work still ahead. Once the log cabin is finished, he can finally start on the fireplace. In earlier seasons, most contestants built stone fireplaces, but Aaron takes a different approach. Instead of a stone hearth, he puts together a wooden frame and packs it over with earth for strength, building the flue as part of the fireplace itself. It's more than just a spot to light a fire. More importantly, it's built to trap heat in the shelter, which decides whether he can endure those long nights in comfort. To keep the cabin moving toward completion, he also can't let his food supply slide. He pauses work on the fireplace and walks to the shoreline to check his fishing lines and shore set poles. Those are the rigs Aaron set up. While he keeps working on the shelter, these rods are effectively fishing for him around the clock.
Come on, baby. No. Oh. Yes, sir. Yes.
These automatic lines have brought in quite a few pike for Aaron. Today's 31-inch pike is nothing more than his now routine daily ration of meat. Aaron also realizes that in the coming winter, fish may prove more valuable than he imagined because in a low-temperature environment, the body needs fat that can be converted into heat even more than it needs pure protein. And these fish end up giving him precisely what he needs. Out here, the Arctic can change overnight. Arctic winter comes sooner than they expect. Overnight, snow lies thicker on the peaks, and a sharp morning wind cuts through the forest, setting the branches swaying and adding a distinct chill to what had been a quiet camp. Seeing the shift in the weather, Aaron senses the first big snowfall is close at hand. Although his cabin has taken shape, the fireplace is still unfinished. If he doesn't get this heater done before the deep cold arrives, the nights ahead will be even rougher. Finishing the fireplace now becomes his most urgent task. Aaron carries the pre-made branch frame down to the riverbank and begins searching for the materials he needs. He combines mud with branches and smears mud over the frame, so this basic structure takes shape, layering and reinforcing the frame again and again until a seemingly simple fireplace is slowly built up. Once the fireplace is finished, Aaron first lights a fire at the base. Because the freshly applied mud hasn't fully dried yet and needs to be slowly baked by the fire to make the whole structure stronger, Aaron lets the fireplace fully cure, knowing that once the first heavy snow hits, it may become his most important defense against the cold. The snow building on the distant mountaintops is likewise pushing Burti to make his permanent shelter his main daily focus. To gain more time, Burti starts his day's work before dawn has fully broken. He simmers the remaining rabbit bones into a breakfast broth, quipping that once he drinks it, he'll have the strength to fell 6 more spruce trees. Up to now, Burti has finished the main framework of his shelter. Now he only needs to gather spruce boughs to cover the outer walls, and it will be basically done. The process itself is simple, but it requires a large amount of spruce branches, which turns it into a slow job. Yet, as he watches the shelter slowly take shape, Burti feels a twinge of regret for making it so big to begin with, because it really drained his energy. Yet when he considers his future need to store food and using extra space to smoke and preserve fish, he thinks the decision wasn't wrong. Burti methodically layers spruce boughs over the shelter, sticking to his plan for a sturdy home. He gets a small piece done each day, staying busy without pause, but never to the point of overexertion. When mealtime comes, Burti must pause to eat. The fish soup, long simmered in the pot, has become a milky broth, a layer of fat shimmering on top, just what his body craves in this cold. After eating his fill, Burti heads to the shore to fish. Even though plenty of fish still hang in camp, he doesn't stop fishing, because with winter on the way, his current stores are nowhere near enough. Before the lake freezes over, he needs to stockpile as much food as he can to be ready for the cold season ahead. Burti has already worked out his own fishing method. He uses animal organs as bait, which almost always brings him a catch. Before winter closes in, this reliable fishing routine is steadily expanding his food reserves. With ample supplies coming in, Burti is all the more motivated when working on his shelter. The busy days pass quickly, yet the shelter is still far from complete. Because the shelter is relatively tall, Burti decides to build a ladder so he can work more easily on the roof. He cuts a few slender tree trunks, then saws and joins them together into a ladder. While Burti is working, thick smoke keeps billowing from the shelter, so I figure his lunch is ready. Today's lunch is just a squirrel head. The ingredients are simple, but from inside Burti's shelter, you can see smoked fish hanging over the fire and berry cakes laid out to dry on the boards. Burti may be the most comfortable. With plenty of food stored up, once the shelter is done, Burti should soon be able to relax for a long stretch. After a quick bite, he throws himself once more into building the shelter, fastening the ladder in place with rope so he can more easily work on the higher sections, bringing this permanent shelter one step closer to true completion. With the ladder fixed in place, Burti starts closing in the shelter's roof. With the ladder, he climbs onto the roof and spreads spruce branches across it in layers. Beyond improving the roof, Burti also redesigns the entrance to the shelter. Instead of a direct doorway, he adds a long, narrow entry passage. This way, the entry acts as a buffer, so less cold air pours straight in whenever he opens the door. As the shelter nears completion, Burti at last permits himself a short rest. After a full day of work, he sits in camp to eat his dinner. The berry cake in his hand is simple fare, but out here, any meal he can eat in peace is already precious enough. 2 weeks pass, and rain again blankets the Arctic Circle. Burti checks his traps, but finds nothing. And when he returns to camp, exhaustion crashes over him. The effort of building the shelter has exceeded his expectations. Looking at the unfinished shelter before him, he begins to question his decisions. He eats daily. His body still refuses to recover, and he no longer knows whether he can keep going.
Thinking bigger shelter, just a little bit too ambitious, depleted.
I'm confused. I'm eating every day and now becoming afraid. Are my energy levels going to come back?
Burti stared at the forest and pictured all the trips still needed to drag in spruce branches for his shelter. The thought drained away his will to continue, and in the end, Burti chose to withdraw from the competition. In hindsight, he was clearly among the season's most distinctive contestants. He had ample food reserves and had built a sizable permanent shelter. Yet this very drive for a perfect shelter pushed his body far beyond what he'd foreseen. In the wilderness, better living conditions almost always come at a higher price. Burti didn't fall to hunger or cold. It was the mental strain of long solitude and relentless effort that finally broke him. Burti left with regret, but the shelter he built remains as proof that he once truly intended to make a life here.